Hey, it's MJ from the Coaches Panel. I hope you're well and welcome back to another of our player reviews as we look back through every single player that changed clubs via free agency or trade during the 2023 off-season. Tell you what it means for the club they've left, the club they've arrived at, and put it all together for us that play AFL Fantasy, SuperCoach and Dream Team, and tell you what I believe it means for the 2024 season and beyond. Talking about the brand new Port Adelaide player, Ivan Soldo. What does it mean for the new club? We'll get to that in a sec. Let's see what it means for his former club. Well, as a net result, and maybe the advantage of getting to this episode a little bit later on has given us the ability to give some really rounded perspective. But the reality is, Ivan Soldo has always been at Richmond a depth option. Toby Nankervis, their leader, their multiple-time premiership player, has been the number one ruck and was going to continue on being that as well. And so from a Richmond perspective, Ivan, a really nice tap ruckman, more than a handy forward target, but in terms of a lead ruck under the guise of Adam Uze and previously to that, the former coach in Damien Hardwick, he never really got to be that. Now, there were times in various seasons where the Tigers did do a split and a dual ruck format, but that was also when they had a variety of different tall forward challenges rolling through there. So for me, I think Richmond, while they weren't thrilled to see Soldo leave, the fact that they've been able to recoup any loss by adding Naismith, who I think is a comparable ruckman in many similar areas, and land themselves another earlier draft selection than they were going to have for a team that hasn't now had a first round pick for what will be 2 consecutive years, given what they've traded away to land Hopper and Taranto, I think is a really astute move for the Richmond Football Club. So the loss of Soldo in the depth of their ruck without the addition of Naismith, I think would have really hurt them, given we do see Nankervis often miss anywhere from 3 to 5, even up to 8 to 10 games a year, either through injuries or just dumb suspensions, and it would then put some greater depth of challenges on some developing kids that they have that I think will be okay, but aren't quite ready enough to soldier and take on the soldiering opportunities of the ruck. So Naismith in, Soldo out. I think Richmond probably feel like this is a net result for them, if not marginally an improvement overall. I think Naismith and Soldo have similar skill sets, and it's not really a loss, especially when you factor in the addition of the draft pick they got from a trade capital. So I think Richmond are feeling relatively happy about this. From a Port Adelaide perspective, with Lysett now not being offered a contract, the addition of Soldo and as well a Jordan Sweet, who we'll get to shortly, does mean they've instantly improved their ruck division. I think the challenge is this though: Soldo and Sweet both have been the bridesmaid ruckman at their former club. Now one of them will be the lead. But who is it? Which is it? Is the one that's maybe the better forward in Soldo that gets that opportunity? Or is it Sweet, who has shown at times forward he's not as strong of an option, but through the middle of the ground is just as capable of a ruckman? I think that's going to be a real fascinating thing for me. From a Port Adelaide perspective though, this is great news. They now have a viable number one and even a number two ruck that arguably are clearly fighting it out for this ruck spot. And so that's great news for Port Adelaide. They were lacking in a number of areas last year, and they're also brilliant in a number of other areas. That's why they got so far in the AFL home and away season and gave themselves an opportunity to push deep into finals, although that didn't work out for them. So I think they're in really good shape by getting 2 really nice rucks onto their list that are going to compete, that are going to be improvements to what they've had this year. I don't think either a dynamite kind of list-defining premiership winning rucks, but what they do is they mean they're no longer losing regularly in this area of the ground against some elite options. It gives their midfield, which is a really talented young list and a really good midfield too, it gives them now an opportunity to give that forward line first use and take a little bit of pressure off their wings and defenders. So I like this move from a Port Adelaide perspective. What does it mean for a fantasy point of view? We'll talk about Soldo specifically in a moment, but it's really really hard to know where to go from this, because Sweet arguably offers considerable more value for us in AFL Fantasy, SuperCoach and Dream Team. He's shown at English, when English is out of the Bulldogs, he can score really, really well and will probably offer greater cash generation based on what in Classic we'll be paying for. But Soldo is probably the guy that's shown he can score a little bit better. Just this year gone at Richmond, he averaged in the mid to low 70s in AFL Fantasy and mid 80s in SuperCoach. Now, in and of themselves, you could look at that and you go, MJ, mid 70s and a mid 80s ruck. Why are you even vaguely suggesting we look at this? For Classic, well, really, really simply, look into a little bit more of the data. Take out the games where he role shared with a Toby Nankervis, where he played as the number one ruck, which, if he does get the opportunity to play in the AFL team for Port Adelaide, is where he will be. They will use guys like a Finlayson, for example, to play the ruck relieving role. They even used Charlie Dixon late in the year in that spot. They've got a number of tall forwards. I can't see, and I don't want to see, if I was a Port Adelaide fan, which I'm not, but if I was, I wouldn't want to see them playing both Sweet and Soldo. I want to see one of them defeating the other for the ruck spot and then letting the other talls I have in my team take that relief ruck role. So Sweet offers more value, but Soldo is the one that could pop more, because without Nank, I think he averaged about 91, 92 this year in AFL Fantasy Dream Team, and there's a 105, 106 sort of range in SuperCoach. That's about 15, even maybe upwards of 20 points per game of value in the ruck line, and that's really helpful for us. He's definitely someone that in Classic we seriously could be looking at, especially if he retains ruck forward status. I'm not sold he does, but I wouldn't be shocked if he was allowed and enabled to hold that, given there was some games he did spend some considerable time forward. So if he's there, this gets really interesting, because now it's not just him playing for that one or two ruck spot, which is going to be highly competitive. We've already done a number of videos right throughout this series, and we'll talk about it lots throughout January and February during the 50 most relevant, that rucks are a fascinating line this year. Last season in 2023, politely, it was Marshall, English, and most other options were arguably not really as helpful. You can build a narrative that there's 10 to 15 different combinations through the ruck. So if Soldo's a ruck forward, opening up that link, and we lose the amount of forwards that I'm anticipating we do at the top end, and that's not replenished, all of a sudden, guys that have the capacity to push 90 in AFL Fantasy and Dream Team, to push the 100 in SuperCoach as a ruck forward, wowee in Classic, this becomes significantly relevant for us. So if Soldo wins out and he retains forward status and is a ruck forward, oh boy, this could be a really interesting prospect for us to look at in Classic next year. If Sweet wins out, it's going to be that kind of move that in a draft format, that's where Ivan Soldo really pop for you. And honestly, I think it's going to be a viable strategy. We've seen it over a number of years where you punt and select your ruckman a little bit late and don't worry too much at the top end. I think the beauty of rucks this year in draft 2 means you can feel really kind of rewarded for going early. Get yourself the Gawn, get yourself the Marshall, get yourself the English, get yourself potentially a Grundy, all of which are very capable of going 105 plus scoring, maybe even up to 120 in SuperCoach, these players. So all have shown they've got that ability. Or you can just punt late, and a combination and a handcuff where you pick 2 rucks from the same team in your draft. All of a sudden you're in a really good spot, because if Soldo is playing, you're good. If Sweet's playing, you're good. So for me, that's definitely a viable strategy that I'd be looking at late in drafts. But what is your take on Ivan Soldo? Do you think he's going to be a nice selection for us in 2024? Does he need to retain DPP? Or regardless, is he destined for some sandful times? I think he's probably got one foot in the door of that lead ruck role. I think given how much Port Adelaide offered at the trade table in draft capital to give up, probably indicates to me that at least now in November, I'd probably have Soldo leading the race. But do you agree or disagree? Comment below and let us know. We've still got a number of players to work our way through that are from this AFL trade and draft period. And so make sure you stick around here on the channel to keep watching them. If you are enjoying these videos, make sure you like them, follow and subscribe on the channel with the notifications on, meaning that whether we upload a video about a player review or anything else that's coming in the 2024 preseason, you will be notified first. Thanks so much for watching. We can't wait to talk with you about another player movement very, very soon.